You can't watch Tiger King all day. At some point, you've got to pay attention to your companion animals. But in these pandemic times, some animals are sadly neglected. That's when the Community Animal Project swings into action. Next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this behind-the-scenes look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. And now that more than 90% of America is sheltering in place, fighting the pandemic, I hope you're all healthy and paying attention to your loved ones, including your animal companions. You know, sometimes they can be neglected and sadly banished to live life, say, on a chain outdoors, as they do in some parts of the country. With unemployment high and some people having a hard time feeding their animals, well, they give them up. And many shelters are crowded and even closed. But not PETA's. PETA runs a shelter that provides low-cost vet care for some of the poorest communities in the nation. I talked to Emily Allen of PETA's Community Animal Project about what it's doing to make sure people are caring for their animal companions during the pandemic on the PETA Podcast.
The Community Animal Project is PETA's local hands-on rescue division. So we help animals in a direct fashion. We work within about a 2-hour radius of Norfolk, Virginia. Much of our work is focused in northeastern North Carolina, which is some of the poorest communities in this part of the United States, where animals really have nobody else to help them. And we do everything. Our field work team does everything from delivering dog houses to replacing heavy chains with lightweight tie-outs to picking up animals for their spay and neuter surgeries to shaving matted fur and sometimes, just simply educating people on how to take proper care of their animals. And we do everything we can to simply make animals' lives even just a little bit better and certainly a little less hellish for many of the animals that are forced to live outside.
And a lot of people don't realize that PETA does this kind of work. It's not a lot of protesting and activism, but it's activism in this different way of caring for the animals. And people don't even really think of PETA as doing this community animal work that you do at CAP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our team is pretty impressive, and we are all animal rights activists. All of us who are working here, we've made a career out of helping animals and rescuing animals, and that that's a pretty rewarding career for many of us. I don't think I always tell people my 15-year-old self would think this job is pretty cool. Every day is very different for us. You never know what you're going to get. And that's exciting. And there's certainly, for somebody who is in this to help the animals, there's certainly no better reward than being able to rescue an animal from a neglectful situation and then hopefully turn around and give that animal a new start in life.
So you're doing this kind of work, which is really this saintly work that no one knows or recognizes most of the time. They just expect it to be done, but you're doing it. And you did it before the pandemic for years. And now, how is it like under the pandemic? What are you finding out there?
I mean, our field workers, we've been, rain or shine, snowstorms, hurricanes, tornadoes. We've kind of seen it all. I mean, this is a little bit obviously unusual for everybody, but our field workers, we don't have the option of working from home. We're still the animals still need us 24/7 and 7 days a week, and so we're still out there doing whatever we can to help animals. And honestly, this is really the time where animals need us the most. What we're seeing a lot is, animals who are chained outside 24/7, there's no respite for them. Even, pandemic doesn't change their situation. And So we're still doing everything we can to get out there to help these animals, and that's everything from shaving matted fur to delivering dog houses to picking up animals for spay-neuter surgeries, and really a whole lot more. What we're finding, or what we're seeing a lot out there, is that we're just being inundated with calls from people who are asking us for help with helping feed their companion animals. And many of the communities we go into are very rural and they're very poor. And on good days, people may be struggling to feed their animals. And certainly right now, with these dire circumstances, people are really struggling to buy a bag of dog or cat food.
Are you finding that people are sick and unwell to take care of their animals and then are neglecting their animals? Or are you finding that that the animals are sick or neglected? Or what is the general state out there?
Well, so far, keeping in mind, these are often rural communities where people may not be refreshing CNN 24/7 like maybe I was doing, when this first started. And so, there's in a lot of these communities, there's maybe a little bit of lack of information on what exactly is going out there. And I think also when you're struggling to feed yourself or your family, you may not be focused on what's going on in the rest of the world right now. So I think people, so far we haven't run into many sick people. And of course, that could change from day to day. We are finding that some people are spending much more time with their animals, especially those of us who do get to work from home, or, those of us who have indoor animals. I think, in those situations, I think, there are some lucky animals who are reaping the rewards of this pandemic. But, unfortunately, those are not really the type of animals that we see it doing this type of work day in and day out.
Tell me about some specific animals that you've encountered since the pandemic started, because you're in Virginia, and Virginia is a shelter-in-place state, I believe, the last I checked. But you go outside to other states. So you're in North Carolina. Are you in South Carolina too, or just North Carolina?
Just Virginia and North Carolina for right now. And there's unfortunately no shortage of work in just our 2-hour service area.
And is North Carolina, are they a shelter-in-place state? I don't recall. I think they might be, but I'm not sure.
I believe they are. There are, of course, quite a few exemptions to that. And specifically in North Carolina, there are exemptions made for helping a friend or neighbor or relative care for their companion animals, and certainly doing social service work as well.
So tell me about some examples of the people and their companion animals that you found on your rounds during the pandemic.
Yeah, for example, we had a nice young couple show up at our building here in Norfolk, Virginia, and they had a very sick elderly Chihuahua named Colada that they loved with all their hearts. And they had tried calling several vets in the area, but they were all told that they're not seeing new patients, or they just kept getting the runaround. And their dog was dying. She had liver failure and just was an older girl who's lived her life, and they were desperate to end her suffering. And so they brought her to PETA, and they were beyond thankful that we provided them for that service, because they really had nobody else or nowhere else to turn to for that help.
Yeah. And any specific animals that you remember?
Yeah, we just came to the rescue of a dog named Chico, who unfortunately had been living in a tiny little pen. I don't even know if I would call it a pen, more like a something that's maybe a little bit bigger than a dog crate, just a tiny cage for the last 2 years. And, right now, when I think the term social isolation is is trending, and, and here we're finding these dogs that have literally been living in isolation for most of their life. And Chico was a case in point. And we were thankfully able to rescue him, and we were able to transfer him to one of our shelter partners, the Norfolk SPCA, where he was quickly put up for adoption.
Yeah. Did he find a home, or you don't know yet, or what's his status?
He's still available for adoption. This just happened within the last week or so, and so he's getting all the care that he needs and getting a medical exam, and he's currently available for adoption.
Are you finding a lot of Chicos out there?
We are, and that, that pandemic or no pandemic, unfortunately, there is no shortage of animals who are tied outside 24/7 or kept in a barren cage with nobody to play with, or no exercise or companionship while they're out there.
Do you think that would be a fair representation of the landscape out there when it comes to people and their companion animals?
Times are changing. We tend to work in communities that are, sometimes 20 years behind the times, and those are the communities where often animals need us the most, and also their guardians need us the most. They need help taking better care of their animals, and that's really what our program is designed for.
Do you think that shelters, though, in general, are having some struggles these days? Because I know some have closed, some don't know what to do with the animals that they have. In general, sheltering is pretty tough around the country these days, no?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of shelters close their doors, even if it's temporary, but which is really unfortunate because, like I said, this is the time that animals need us the most. And when we hear of shelters who are turning their back to stray or owner surrendered animals, that's a really unfortunate situation to be in, because the animals didn't choose choose to be in that situation. And so it is a tough time for animal sheltering right now. We're lucky here in the Norfolk, Virginia area that many of our partner shelters are still open, and their animals are available for adoption. And certainly, I think they're struggling with adoptions right now, and they've made some changes as well. I think most shelters in this area, for instance, have switched over to appointment-only adoptions just to limit the number of people who do come into their doors, and limit the number of people who are in the building at any given time.
But is this a time that people are generally staying away, or thinking about adopting a dog, or thinking about adopting any kind of companion animal? And should they be? Because this is the greatest need right now.
Yeah, I think many people in this community have come forward offering to foster animals right now, especially people who are working from home and have found themselves indoors a lot more than they used to be. I think this would be a great time for them to take in a new companion animal. Of course, anytime somebody brings a new animal to their home, they should be asking themselves, do I have the time and the resources to provide for this animal? And, honestly, I don't know what will happen when all of this is over and all these animals who are currently in foster care, what will ultimately become of those animals once the shelters do return back to normal.
Because at what capacity would you say a lot of the shelters are operating? If they're not closed, are they at half capacity, a quarter?
Here in the Hampton Roads, Norfolk, Virginia area, I would imagine most shelters are operating at about 50%. And some shelters here have closed their doors for the entire month of April, or closed their doors for any surrender or stray animals that come their way.
Now, when that happens, what happens to the animals? I mean, when a shelter is at 50% capacity, what is the situation for the animals?
When shelters make it difficult for people to surrender or relinquish an animal, the animals pay the price for that. And that often means that they get abandoned on the streets, they get released into the woods, And it often means they die a terrible, horrible death, by being hit by a car, being attacked by another animal, or poisoned by somebody who simply doesn't want that animal around.
Are you seeing much of that?
Thankfully, we so far have not seen an increase in abandonments. Certainly we don't have, we don't have a tracking device on every animal or every situation. So it's hard to say, but thankfully so far we haven't seen an increase in people abandoning their animals. And, I do think the longer that this drags out, the harder it will be for people to continue feeding their animals, and that's certainly an issue that we'll need to address.
Now, the Community Animal Project, is that the same as PETA Shelter?
Yes, PETA does operate a shelter here in Norfolk, Virginia, a licensed shelter, and that all falls under the same division. We're lucky that we have many of the animals that we take in who are surrendered to us. We transfer to one of our local shelter partners, and many of our happy endings or success stories just wouldn't be possible without their help.
And are you finding that when the people come to PETA to adopt a companion, are they more frequent these days, or because of the pandemic, are they staying away?
Well, many of the animals who we find homes for were able to advertise on Facebook or other social media platforms. We just had a dog. We rescued a dog a few weeks ago named Wayne, who was an older poodle who was tied outside 24/7, and we were able to find him a foster home. And PETA just did an email alert about his story, and several wonderful people came forward offering to give him a home. And we think we found the best match for him, and he's actually going to his new home later this week. So we were pleasantly surprised by the number of people who did step forward, who were willing to take him in despite all this craziness.
Well, that's good. A happy story for Wayne. Do you find that people are a little concerned with the virus? I mean, do you dispel the myth that the dogs can carry the virus, or are people concerned about that at all?
Oh, certainly. I think I happened to be in the field on this past Sunday, and I found a dog who was chained outside, and I had recognized the dog as I had been there before, and the dog had always lived indoors. And the woman had several young kids in the home, and she had told me she was putting him outside because she was afraid her kids might catch the virus from the dog. And so we were able to help educate her on, on that the best we can, and try to encourage people to bring their animals indoors.
Now, for the record, the virus cannot spread from a dog or a cat or a companion animal, right?
That's correct. I know just recently with the unfortunate incident of the tiger testing positive in the Bronx, and and I think one thing we're trying to tell people based on that incident is that the only way cats of any kind, or dogs for that matter, get it is from humans, not the other way around.
You assure them that there's no danger when people come and want to adopt a companion animal, that there's no danger in getting the virus.
Absolutely.
And then what about as far as other things that people need to know during this shelter in place or shelter at home, walking their dogs or calling the vet? What do you tell people there?
While I can't speak for every locality, in the majority of jurisdictions, provisions are made for exercising and taking care of your companion animal. And as far as calling a vet or going to vet clinics, many vet clinics have somewhat changed their practices, but in my experience, most are still open in some capacity. Many clinics have switched, including our own spay-neuter clinic, have switched to curbside service, but they are still operating. And certainly if somebody has a sick or injured companion animal, taking them to the vet should be a priority, regardless of the times we're living in.
Is it much harder for you because we're in this situation?
We've adjusted. We're taking all the precautions that we need. We're distancing ourselves from the animals and their guardians as best we can. We're wearing gloves in the field. We're wearing face masks, and which is like everyone is experiencing, a little bit cumbersome right now. But we're at the end of the day, we're still out there helping those that need it the most. So we're taking precautions, and we have to take things in stride and see what each day brings us.
Are there any other tips that we might be able to give listeners about shelters and their companion animals, or animals who may need sheltering at this point during the pandemic?
Let's see. I think the main tip that I would give somebody is to reach out to your local shelter and see what kind of help that they may need, and also to consider donating food, donating dog and cat food to your local food bank, which is something that PETA has continued to do, and that will continue doing, so that people who are struggling to feed their animals do have an option of a place to go to. So I would, shelters, I think, need help now more than ever. So I think simply reaching out to your local shelter, Humane Society, and seeing what resources are available and what supplies they may be short of would be a huge help.
But that's an excellent point. Most people, when they think of food banks, they don't think to donate dog or cat food. And it's probably in short supply. Huh?
Yeah, and if people are feeling generous, our field staff is out there every day delivering dog and cat food to indigent families' doorsteps, and we certainly welcome donations of any kind. Just yesterday, I sent out an email to PETA staffers asking anybody to direct ship food to us, and we were pleasantly overwhelmed just by our own staff who was pitching in and helping out, so that families don't have to relinquish animals just because they're having a hard time feeding them right now.
Emily Allen leads PETA's Community Animal Project. And as you heard, some people are having hard times just feeding their dogs and cats. For more about what you can do to help companion animals in this pandemic, go to PETA.org. And that's our program. You can contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok, that's EMILAMOK, or on ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog, or on amok.com, AMOK.com. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Music is provided by Carbon Works. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.